Entonces habló con la directora que no quiere nada. Entonces habló con ellos y ya le parece que dice que cada postulante tiene su hombre. Entonces ahí ya le habló con ellos y ya le dijeron que pero ahora que hay una necesidad de cambio, de sistema para traer, no tiene que poder hacer para que no.
Okay, we're going to be looking at a few things tonight, and and hopefully things are, we'll run things smoothly, and and I'm just making sure that things are gonna run our way. Okay, and first of all, welcome back. I hope you got, a nice break, and I'm sure you did. The first thing that I need to announce right away is the fact that you are going to be having a third report to be turned in, and that's going to be coming soon, and I will be sending you tonight, or at the latest probably tomorrow, what the third report is going to be, and we're going to focus in economics, and basically it's the Santa Fe ring, and our archives are working beautifully, so everything that comes out tonight, or everything that you need to do, or any kind of links that you may want to be interested to check, they're going to be working just fine. Okay, so so make sure you take a look of that. So get good reference. I'm going to be sending you a sample as usual, and that has to deal with that. I haven't put grades in TalentNet, but there is already the your identity report is already in Turnitin. Okay, so you can take a look at it there. I'm just going to be putting that thing in TalentNet, so it's going to be there. And the Hidalgo trade is coming this week. Probably by tomorrow or Wednesday, you're also going to be doing that. You're going to see this. You're going to be seeing these grades posted, and probably in a couple of days. Well, identity is already posted in Turnitin. Hidalgo trade is going to be posted in Turnitin pretty soon. Okay, and then I'm going to put both grades in TalentNet. So you're going to have, you'll have your grades in TalentNet, and also you're going to have them in Turnitin. The due date for the economics report is going to be March 8th, which is a Friday, and of course midnight. Okay, so those of you who are vampires, you still can go and go for a true blood drink after you turn in your reports. Okay, and that's that. Okay, so being given that, the one thing that we need to discuss, I'm going to show you some really cool stuff from a guy by the name of Baca, which is from New Mexico, so you could have a little bit more of a solid idea of what of what the general feelings and the sense of loss is in New Mexico. I think that Baca is a fantastic storyteller in many ways, and we're going to be, we're going to deviate a little bit to what you're seeing in terms of the politics. But there are two things that you need to look at, the Mexican American culture that we've been discussing last week. Again, it's very important that you look at the, archives, because they're very good archives. But we're going to be moving now away a little bit from that. In the colonization of New Mexico, we have that will, and on your report, you really need to focus as much as you possibly can in the economic, the loss. What does it mean to really lose land and this invasion, and what is creating in terms of the cultura? And the one thing we just got to keep in mind is that, as Joaquin has said, whatever it's a necessity for the new comers to the Mexican culture that is going to mean profit to them, are going to be taking it from Mexico and from Mexicans. And that even includes quite a lot of wording, such as lazo and such as riata, and et cetera, which are words that are now part of the English vocabulary, English American West, so to speak. And these words give some sort of sense of country folks, but in essence are all words which are, from the Spanish civilization. But that was a necessity. Do Euro-Americans or Europeans care in any way or form of the language? The answer is no. In fact, they don't even care about their faith. Although priests had been replaced by Irish priests, the bottom line is that Europeans are not at all into embracing the new culture, that new culture that they're going to be meeting, because they're not. They could care less about the new culture, and they're not going to be having anything to deal with that unless it's something that it means profit. So if they're going to take the vaqueros or the charros, which is a definition for the Mexican cowboy, in order to move cattle and do livestock or do the farming, then they're going to take those skills. But the cultura, the religion, the language, the whole aspects of what Mexico can offer to the newcomers is just next to nil or nil. And again, also Mexicans have to face a new economic order, a new order that is going to very much discriminate against them, because you need to remember again the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty, and with this treaty, the whole idea of having this treaty that in place was to actually protect Mexicans' property and culture. Two things were official then: the language, okay, and the religion. Okay, language and religion were automatically were part of Mexico before Euro-Americans ever conquered, or the newcomers ever came, to Texas, Nueva Mexico, Arizona, and California. Okay, these two things were protected. Well, were protected sort of, because once the Guadalupe Hidalgo was stepped on, and and newcomers really did not care about any kind of ways to enforce this, then you had the resistance. And this resistance translated into into Santa Fe reign, which was an alliance of gringos y ricos. And we say gringos y ricos because gringos were the gringos that came to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and they namely came to take over with quite a lot of money, which included, the saloon owner. Okay, you got, of course, the grocery guy. You got the law enforcement, okay, and you got the political. So the ricos mexicanos decided that they were going to be part of these things, and then they actually established some sort of a very risky alliances with this new order, okay, especially, of course, the ricos mexicanos, the rich Mexicans. And so now, what would happen if this really will take place, in essence? So these alliances with the ricos did not last. And at the end, these ricos Mexicanos that they thought they were high-class Mexicanos, and they did not want to associate with the poor Mexicanos or peons or whatever you want to call it, okay, at the end, they ended up being in the same in the same gutter. They still had their land taken over. They had no resources, and if they had a lot of wealth, well, they could, maybe tangle up in courts, so to speak, try to defend their titles. Their titles were Mexican titles, which the newcomers did not recognize. They thought, well, that's sort of a land grant that you got from some king, and well, we don't care about that. This is very important, or actually grants, which were basically grants or land grants that were given to the settlers way before Europeans ever got here. And these grants, of course, were mentioned in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. They were certainly not even mentioned when the United States government or the new powers in New Mexico began to take over these grants and just outright land grabbing. And this is a big word, land grabbing. Okay, because land grab, that's exactly what it is. Okay, you just go to someone's house and you take over, and you say, this is mine now. Okay, you take chunks of land, you take chunks of everything, and eventually these particular grants are divided and subdivided, are sold illegal, are bought illegally. There is fraud, there's corruption. So, and when you have the big powers to be, such as the district attorney and the political control, and these newcomers with a lot of power from Washington now, and then the developers of the railroad and roads. There's very little that you could do in terms to try to keep your land, and it's just not going to be for long before that's taken over. According to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, there are Mexicans in the United States today that they can clearly argue that there are land grants that belong to them and are protected by the treaty, and this can be in Arizona, in New Mexico, and in Texas. And to some point, quite a lot of Mexicans have been able to do that. We already know one that was Reyes Tejerina. Okay, but Reyes Tejerina was eventually arrested and thrown in jail, and etc. Now, great question there. How about high officials? Were they able to keep their lands? The answer is yes. First, they took land illegally, and because they have the power and political control, they were able to take their land? That's a very good question, because on that note, the one thing that I really want to point out right now is hopefully hopefully you did read some of this stuff, but in the Santa Fe Ring and the land grab creates in New Mexico what was known as the Lincoln County War. And this is very interesting because it talks about a Mexican by the name of Juan Patron, who is a very smart individual, because he had quite a lot. Actually, the Patron family had money, and Juan Patron was actually sent to the East Coast, to the Northeast Coast, to study law, and he actually graduated from the University of Notre Dame in Indiana. Okay, so he was an extremely honest, studious, and very industrious individual. And in about 1878, he even became a delegate for the House of Representatives in New Mexico, and he was elected the Speaker of the House. Okay, so he was a teacher and a very smart guy, but unfortunately, he had no choice but to try to look for some of the rights of Mexicans that were losing their land, like with unspeakable crimes that were committed against them. And but at any rate, when Patron decided to do something in Lincoln County, New Mexico, eventually he was murdered by this guy by the name of Mitch Money, who was just a cheapo cowboy. Okay, and the big lawyers from that time defended this guy, and the result was a hung jury, and this guy Manny was never retried. That was the end of a very big figure in Lincoln County. But this also should serve us as an example that when there's resistance, this ends in violence, because people always feel the need to fight back for their land. This is very important, and for Mexicans, this was very important, because by law, the law protected their land and their holdings. Okay, but this treaty was never respected. As all treaties in the United States, I'd say, I would go as far as saying that most treaties in the United States that the United States government had signed, for example, with Native Americans, were just not respected at all. They were, they were just maneuverings to, appease Native Americans, and then at the end, they were just take over. And yeah, there was thirst for land, because there was no more land in the East Coast, and these groups were coming more and more and more to expand from sea to shining sea, which was again the ultimate dream of this man, President Polk, who just simply had in mind to expand all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and he largely created that expansion, and he was successful at it. Okay, so the comparison with California is that California had these individuals, Californios. And who were the Californios? Were again the same kind of ricos, or rich people, rich Mexicans, which they thought they were special and actually superior than the rest of the Mexicanos, because these guys had the money. They were, the big-time settlers. Pico is one guy, and if you look around us, it's Cerritos College. Well, Pico and Pico Rivera, he was actually the very first governor of California, very big politician, all that stuff in the era in which, you got you got all these very rich Californians roaming around the land. Californians too thought that by making these alliances with the new incoming people, that was inevitable. They probably could protect their own, their own throats. But no, they decayed and they went down. And in the chapters that we read, in California Lost, and there are some clear definitions, and there are some myths that, California is the golden place to be. California is beautiful. Talks about the landscape is a metaphor of how people saw California, Eden, okay? Talks about this real mythical thing that Spaniards brought civilization to California and with its salvation as an idyllic life, okay? All right, but this was basically long gone as a fantasy heritage, okay? But because the reality is like, before the Spaniards, California was extremely populated then, actually. In the book, namely, it says that 500,000 indigenous people lived in what became the Golden State. And then you got Chumash, Palut, Shasta, okay? Chumash are today in the reservations for some of those big casinos that are very famous today now in California. Okay. And then, of course, the story that Fray Junipero Serra, which brought the Spanish crown here to California, and actually loaded all these missions throughout the state. Interesting, when we're looking about the Jesuit missionaries that came, with missions in California, and the Franciscans that went and conquered actually the Alta California. Okay. The first colonists were actually African Indians and mestizos and a mixed race of people called castas, okay, all right? And eventually you also had full-blooded Spaniards, which were the exception. Baja and later Alta California were on the frontier of Sonora. So the Spaniards preferred urban areas, especially those where they could get rich fast, such as mining districts. California was always a rich place to come, okay? But this also created, needless to say, this also created the brush between Mexicans that were, in the way, and then other groups of people that came massively because of the gold. One of the things that it's very important to understand here is the invasion to California was by a guy by the name of Fremont, okay, who just simply invaded, put up the bear flag, and with the complicity of Californians, he was able to do what the United States government wanted him to do in California, which basically is to conquer and take possession of that state no matter what, okay? So California then was lost. The Californians eventually were dropped and gone. And what is interesting is that Mexicans also began to be treated as foreigners. And they had to pay taxes, which was foreign taxes. Okay, for example, anybody that's a foreigner out of a state in the state of California needs to pay some. For example, students pay international student fees, out-of-state fees for students coming to coming to California before a year's residency and establishing all that stuff. Okay, in the system, in the perennial, perverse system that was developed by, the new order in the state of California, Mexicans, at one point were just simply considered not Americans at all. They were just Mexicans. They were here. They were foreigners, and these are the Mexicans that they were here even before. So they had to be foreign. They have to pay taxes for whatever they did, which was foreign taxes. For example, during the gold rush, you got Mexicans that got very astute and very good into having a mule business. Well, it means that if you're just out there somewhere in the ore, wherever you're exploiting gold, you're washing mountains in the state of California, and then you're washing gold, and then you're the good old gold rush and the golden prospectors that we had in the state of California, and gold country is just full of those in Northern California. I mean, amazing. Placerville, Nevada, Butte, all those counties up in the north, Chester and Plumas and Modoc, all these counties were just the big time counties for the gold, when gold was discovered. So people just were washing gold like mad, and people became just absolutely, completely obsessed about coming to the state of California, and that was known as the gold fever. Okay, people died needlessly and all that stuff. Well, gold diggers and prospectors were not kind. They were after the gold no matter what. Okay, but they needed quite a lot of infrastructure, such as mules. That was transportation. Okay, so Mexicans began to get into the mule business, because then they would take supplies, food, whatever these guys needed, and then they would take also the animals, take care of the animals, and then bring back whatever they were getting, etc., etc. Well, not soon after, the state decided that, hey, what are these Mexicans doing with mules? These are foreigners. They should pay taxes. And we began to tax them. Okay. Another gruesome thing that we did was this started in Texas. Okay. Is we run Texas polls, tax polls. One would think, well, what does a tax poll mean? Well, a tax poll means that if you want to vote? Are you kidding me? You pay. You pay to vote. Now, when you're looking at Mexicans being driven into the utmost poverty, and the more years that go by and the less respect for the treaty, okay, now you're talking about at least 2/3 of Mexicans that were driven into poverty. So when you need to feed your family, the last thing you want to do is pay extra to vote. And the answer was no, this was only for Mexicans and others, like Chinese, which were severely discriminated, and eventually the Japanese too. However, during this time, these votes were just only given for Mexicans, and Mexicans had to pay in order to vote. Therefore, you never got the Mexican vote. Therefore, the new Europeans enjoyed a lot more political control, because they didn't have to worry about Mexicans voting against them, or why not. Okay, so these complicities is what you're looking for when you're reading the book, and you're looking at how gold transformed California and how the United States invasion of California took place. Lots of names there. Fremont is a big city up north, etc., etc. Then these taxes that Mexicans had to pay was known as the foreign miners tax. Okay, and this was completely and totally designed to to try to get into into Mexicans and Mexicans' lives. We're gonna take a few minutes already, and we're gonna look at that video again, which is called the tortilla tax in New Mexico, which was absurd. Okay, so let's tax Mexicans for the most part. If you buy groceries, not liquor or cigarettes, but groceries in the state of California, do you pay taxes? The answer is no, not a chance. That's why when you buy your milk and your bread and everything at the store, and then they tell you, okay, sir, it's $15, that's exactly what it is. They don't have to say $15 plus tax. However, some states have gotten the audacity to charge taxes on food. Okay, that was not really long-lived. I believe that either Alabama or Oklahoma are one of the two states that you actually pay taxes when you just go to the grocery stores, which is outrageous. However, let's look at this thing about New Mexico. In New Mexico, the government decided in the state that they were going to actually put a tax to tortillas. I guess because Mexicans eat a lot of tortillas. Okay, the bottom line is that this was absurd, ridiculous. It didn't go nowhere, and the state agonized until they finally decided that this was not a good idea. Okay, this is no different than taxing somebody because somebody is actually a person from another race. Okay, so Mexicans began to their own their own calvary, their own suffering, as basically being foreigners in a foreign land. I would attempt to say that this particular situation has been replicated in many societies in the world today, in which entire nations are completely displaced from their own homeland and their own turf. Okay, and you cannot have a situation in which you have an entire nation that does not have a country per se. Okay, and Mexicans suffered through this experience. First of all, by being told that the Guadalupe Hidalgo was going to protect them. Second, if after the takeover you still live in an American soil now, you can become a you have to become a U.S. citizen, but not a first-class U.S. citizen. You're going to become a citizen, a second-class U.S. citizen, etc. And that in turn meant that eventually Mexicans were considered just exactly that, foreigners. And they were considered foreigners in a foreign land, because where else could you be Mexican unless you actually went back to Mexico? Mexico, of course, families, entire families, that they decided not to go for this particular way of life and treatment in the colonial days, and during the European move to take over all California as well, became less and less and less and less and less of citizens, and they become more and more and more and more as the invisible people. Okay, they were only good for hard work. They were only good to be used as peons. And not to say the fact that Mexicans made less than their white counterparts. Just that simple, okay? So this is why in the Movimiento on Civil Rights, you got now people like Cesar Chavez or Corky Gonzalez, and their own political party known as La Raza Unida Party. Okay, this is an amazing, this is an amazing accomplishment of Mexican Americans. We're going to look at it in a few minutes. I'm just going to show you some video clips on that, so you can really take a look at that, and we're also going to see some of the sentiments of Santiago Baca. Okay, and we're gonna look at a few things in just a few minutes, so you could just have a little bit more of how you could start thinking what this economic paper is and why is it that it's why is it that once this is taking over, this whole society of peoples are taking over. And eventually then Mexicans themselves are accused of being illegal. Okay, they're accused of invading. Okay, and when you're talking about illegal and when you're talking about invading, okay, all right, then society begins to complain about that maybe the problem of the United States happens to be the problem of the United States, is all these illegal aliens, okay, and so these illegal aliens are creating a lot of economic problems, and they got to be deported. What I guess society doesn't tell us is that, in fact, if we don't have cheap labor, which is Mexican, unfortunately, okay, then start expecting your gallon of milk to cost $50. Why? Because now you have to pay workers workman's comp, insurance, that means health, life. Now you have to also pay minimum okay. In the good old days, in the farms, farmers were paid only a box of tomatoes, a box of oranges, a box of whatever. Okay, so Mexicans had no choice but to take their whole family to work in the farms. Okay, and then if they had to uproot their whole family for 2 more cents an hour that somebody was, that was paid in Calabasas County, then they would just go and move the whole family. And this is just what Mexicans ended up with at the very end end side of the stick. All right? And then also, for many Mexicans were, of course, a necessity, because who else is going to do this kind of labor anyways? So damn if you like Mexicans, damn if you don't. Okay, it's just always going to be just some sort of a bipolar, bipolar attitude of the United States towards Mexicans. And again, as I said in the beginning, I'm going to again reminding you of this, okay? Mexicans Americans have fought all wars defending the good old USA, okay? All of them. So they have huge contributions in all areas. You're talking about education, you're talking about medicine, you're talking about the sciences and the maths and all that stuff. Yes, there has been huge contributions in all areas. Okay? The first female astronaut into space is a Mexican American. And she was sent to space missions by NASA 4 times. It'll be the last time. And a female. Let me just write that. Female. Okay. So I think it's important because even in high schools and in junior highs today, I think that teachers don't make they do a disservice to the students when they don't tell the students how important these role models are. Okay, because in Mexican American society, these role models are very important. Why? In education, if you happen to have somewhat a very good admiration of one instructor, you want to be like that instructor. If you want to be a teacher, you want to have 3, 4, 5 teachers out there that are the role models for you. If you're a great soccer player, you want to keep in mind that maybe you want to be like Messi, maybe you want to be like Ronaldinho, maybe you want to be like I'm trying to Marcus, or you want to be like Javi, and etc. The world is full of heroes. Okay, if you're a swimmer, are you kidding? I'm sure you already have at least one great swimmer in mind. Okay, all right. And no, I'm not going to tell you who that great guy is. All right, you think about it on your own. I'll tell you, Luganis, the guy that the diver. Okay, all right. Anybody, write the name down of the famous U.S. swimmer. Come on. All right, if you don't, well, that's too bad. Oh, my God, somebody knew about it. Whew, Jesus. Okay. All right, there you go. Okay, so you want to become a swimmer like Michael Phelps. Really, can you? Well, yeah. Look at what the guy is. Look what he does. Look at how he works and all that stuff. Those are models. Okay, what do Mexican Americans have as models? What do they see? They see labor. They see cheap labor. They see struggle with these families. They see poverty. They see gardeners. They see bathroom people cleaning. They see all these. They see janitors and all that stuff. Okay, that is work and that's honest. But what do we really need for good role models? Mexican American education was appalling all the way to the 70s and the 80s. Mexican American education's drop rate is appalling. Mexican American students are the majority of the city of Los Angeles. but yet in the majority that they are, and in the majority of the Mexican American schools on the mid LA and on the east side, okay, there are no comparisons against the counterparts of the same districts in West LA, for example. Why is that? Okay, so I think that it comes a time when the lid just opens up and there's too much pressure and this resistance becomes a reality. It is going to generate two factors, peace and violence. Okay? Because as peaceful as some of the protests can ever be, there is going to be confrontation. Because Mexican Americans then begin to claim some space which was denied to them for 100 years. Okay? This is very important. Okay? Because it is what it is. Mexicans lost their language, their culture, their religion, the way of thinking, the way of dancing, all that. Okay? It is true. Many Mexican Americans have been sort of Americanized because now they are United States citizens. But you got to always remember that in the 70s and in the 80s, okay, all these Mexican American citizens did not have the same rights as all other citizens per se. Okay, things were not equal. In 1970, we got 40 Chicanos at UCLA. That is absurd. Okay, today the number might be about 1,500. Okay, that's today. However, the university has about 45,000 students. So if you're looking at about other institutions like this, okay, are you kidding? Love to see numbers of Mexican Americans here. Okay? No, and it's not going to be that. Well, why? Well, at the turn of the century, now you got, white European American class, which they have already grants and trusts for college education. Okay? If you're looking at a Mexican American family, a Mexican American family at the turn of the century in 20th century is just simply trying to survive. And thanks to this GI Bill, which is federal grants and loans for real estate for people that had served in the United States Armed Forces. Okay, they qualify for the GI Bill, and basically low interest, low down, etc., etc. Thanks to the GI Bill and for the many Mexican American heroes coming from World War II, okay. For first time in the 1950s, Mexican Americans finally started to get or to buy property. Think about how this must have felt. So there is a reason once you go to East LA, okay, and you're going to see how attached Mexicans are from those properties in there. East LA is a thriving community. There's just incredible amount of thriving business in there. There are many wealthy Mexican Americans that live today in East LA, and they live in East LA. Maybe the new generations are telling, well, Mom, with Dad, God, you know, all your life you work your butt off. Now you have a lot of money. Why don't you go to live in Malibu? Why don't you go to live everywhere else? They will never go. Okay, and East LA also has embraced other societies and other cultures. Okay, as well, and then you know, because it is just what you know, what they culturally can feel in tune with what this community is like. Okay, so there are many Middle Eastern places in East LA that deal specifically with chickens. Okay, and the most fresh chickens that you will ever find in LA are going to be in East LA, and it's going to be sold by the Middle Eastern people. Okay, interestingly enough, but that's a fact. Okay, I'll provide you with the name of a place that has been already shown 3 times in the LA Times and in the community at large. Okay, but that's just basically the nature. Okay, so you could be the richest man in town. He still has his place in East LA because most Mexican American boxers that came to fame in the United States, in Mexico, and in the world are from East LA. Okay, many women authors have written about the boxing gyms in East LA as well. So this is just so you can understand this. Okay, how in essence you know, Mexican Americans have survived, beating all odds, okay, because they were just so much legalizing of bad things. You know, for example, in California, one of the things that by now you're probably appalled to read is that California came up with the Civil Practice Act of 1850, which prohibited Chinese and Native Americans from ever testifying against whites. Okay? And you got to remember that racism increased then because the new majority, because for the new majority, what was known as the greaser, a greaser was a greaser. And then most had not read the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and they did not care to read the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Okay? So, so even racism was absolutely and totally legalized then. Okay, so can you imagine be a Chinese and try to, you know, argue that you wanted to simply, you know, renegade and try to, by law, protest against a white person? No, the courts also apply this section to Mexicans. The courts apply the section against the Chinese that prohibited Chinese and Native Americans. That was also applied to Mexicans because in 1855, the state legislature refused to provide funds for translation of state laws into Spanish despite the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and the state constitution. Okay? All right. So, by the way, that same year, in 1855, the state of California passed the Greaser Act, and that was known as the Greaser Act, which defined vagrants as all persons who were commonly known as greasers or the issue of Spanish or Indian blood. So in April of 1857, all right, a court denied this gentleman by the name of Manuel Dominguez, a signer of the first California Constitution and a wealthy landowner, and a county supervisor, the right to testify because of his Native American blood. The other thing also had to do basic, straight out color of the skin. So, how do you know a Mexican? It's very simple, I guess. If you're a little brown, you have, and then you're Mexican. Done. It is just the assumption. And that's what's going to happen and that's what it's currently happening in this state, which is called profile. Is profiling illegal in most every state? The answer is yes, not in Arizona anymore. Well, that's right, However, if you're a little brown, if you're in Arizona, somebody might stop you and say, where are your papers? Not license. Papers. The assumption is you are not from here. Right? So that's what I mean by that. But there are two laws in California, in Arizona today. These laws probably are too pervasive in California and they would never pass. Now they're in the legislature. Another question that most students ask me is, what about the death penalty? Okay. Well, let me tell you that in the world, death penalty doesn't really exist in most societies in the world. They can kill you for treason if you're, if you betray the country for some reason. Even in the United States, in military courts, treason could be, you could get the death penalty for it. But Mexico does not have the death penalty, and all Latin American countries do not have the death penalty. Most European nations do not have the death penalty. There's quite a lot of punishment out there, but in the United States, it's a state. The state of California does have the death penalty. At one point in my life, I was asked, what I thought about it. Well, here's the story. If you happen to be Catholic, then no death penalty. Sorry. So if you believe in the death penalty, if you happen to be Catholic, well, change religion. Okay? Find some group that believes in it, or stop being a Catholic. You can't do it. And I like that. Two wrongs don't make it a right. That's true. Now, you could argue, of course, the fact that, well, yeah, but, look at Scott Peterson, that monster, drowned his wife with his baby, okay? The lady was 9 months pregnant, so he killed two of them. He killed the wife and he killed his own child. How can he be a monster? That guy, we should burn him alive, etc., etc. Okay, whatever, how you're going to look at that. Okay, however sides you're going to see. But this, to me, it's the most important fact. Okay? Okay, the most important fact of the death penalty is as follows. First of all, lynching Mexicans. This became very common. Lynch means a kangaroo trial. We think that you rape somebody, we're going to kill you. Lynching, to lynch somebody, means to just simply go after somebody, assume that that person is guilty, and kill him. Done. And lynching became a way of life in the United States during the slavery period, in which you went out and lynched slaves if one of them escaped. Okay, well, it's against the law for a slave to escape, so you lynch him, okay? And 3, 4, 5 people, they just throw a rope in a tree and they hang the guy, okay? And then that's done by law, all right? So it's really sad how you're going to be looking at it, okay? Yeah, it is controversial, Sandra. There's no doubt in my mind that it is. And at one point, it was illegal in the state of California. It became legal, then it became illegal, then it was reinstated again, and now the state of California is actually thinking not to have it anymore, because we killed the wrong people. DNA and other tests showed that whoever we killed, whoever we executed, oops, I'm sorry, it was wrong. So the state of Illinois, and completely on a reverse situation, the governor and the mayor of the city of Chicago, they just completely wiped it out of the face of the earth because you cannot making mistakes and putting people into the death row if they don't belong there. The reason why I will never agree with the death penalty in the state of California is because the first inmate that was put to death in California was a Mexican woman by the name of Juanita, who asked a drunken guy to leave her house because she was basically defending her property and her men, by the way. All right? So this guy by the name of Fred Cannon, who actually broke down the door of Juanita, Josefa actually was her name, okay, and then try to rape her, try to get some sex from her, and beat up her husband or her men. Okay, so Josefa said, you need to basically leave, and Josefa just basically couldn't take it anymore and just killed him. Call that self-defense, call that defending her property, call that defending her men. And maybe many of us would be able to do that. She was immediately taken by a lynching crowd. They held actually a kangaroo trial, okay? And immediately she was convicted. She was pregnant, and she was hanged from a bridge in front of a huge crowd, clapping and having fun, enjoying this. This happened in 1875. Okay? So, actually 1851, I'm sorry. Okay? So lynching went on all the way from 1851 till 1930s and 1940s. During the civil rights in Mississippi, when Mississippi Ku Klux Klan or KKK did not allow, but they terrorized blacks so they wouldn't vote and go to the polls and vote. Okay. 3 New Yorkers or from the north came to Mississippi to try to get some of the votes, and they were absolutely lynched in Mississippi. They were murdered and lynched, and they were and their bodies were put in some swamp and made them disappear. In time, these bodies were recovered, the cars were recovered, the whole murder was reconstructed, and someone had to be convicted eventually. Again, a very dark picture of American society was lynching. Okay, it was more pervasive than no rights for women for women for the votes, or or for getting tolerant and allowed everybody to vote, and etc. etc. The United States had to come to terms to its own non-adequate, not very adequate things in terms of providing overall rights. This kind of history in the state of California has again repeated again, and this thing was, violence was legitimized by laws. Okay, and then of course you are going to also look in California laws. You're also going to be reading about certain particular publications which were actually which was actually given and begin to surface, and in Spanish, and the El Clamor Público was one of them, which denounced about all this, you know, irreversible type of measures against Mexicans. And of course, they were running the risk of being burned, those newspapers being burned, etc., etc. Okay, so I think that it's very important that you know, internalize yourself. There's going to be famous Joaquin Murrieta. Okay, in addition of Joaquin Murrieta, you're also going to be looking at Tiburcio Vázquez. These were the most famous outlaws in the state of California by a long shot. They were outlaws for Euro-Americans. But for Mexicans, they were folk heroes, so they were like Robin Hoods, okay? Joaquin Murrieta went berserk because you know, his wife and his daughter were raped and killed, and so he went to avenge them, and maybe we would have done the same thing again. But the minute he did that, he now was a Mexican outlaw. The whole, the whole law enforcement, the whole cowboys, the whole lynching groups went after him. They found him, they cut his head off, and then they actually exhibit his head in Stockton for a number of days in chloroform. And by the way, you have to pay in order to see this. So they actually made even profit of a lynching. Let me tell you, in this chapter, lynchings were very carefully planned, because lynching meant a business for everybody, because people went to see that. So you need to have vendors, you need to have people taking pictures. You could have actually your picture being taken next to a Mexican boy who was hanged, who was accused of raping somebody or whatever. School children went to witness this because it was kind of a cool field trip. And then not only that, but in the United States, we actually made postcards and Christmas cards with these pictures, so you could send to your grandmother. This is why I'm saying this is probably one of the really darkest periods of American history, in which lynching was actually a thriving business. And no, you didn't only just took the revenge, but if you're going to get that Mexican and hang him and do whatever you need to do, you wanted to make sure that you made some profit out of it, and this some profit generally was very large. Okay, so I think that these are the kind of things that I think it's important that when you are going over these archives and having shared. And by the way, some of you rock. Okay, because I appreciate all your comments that have been coming around, okay, from a lot of you tonight, okay, in which is okay, because you need to ask questions, you need to put your, input in there. Somebody might say something really cool, you need to comment. There's nothing wrong about this, and I embrace that. Okay. Give me just 2 seconds. I'm gonna get out, and then I'm just going to set up some really. There's a couple of cool things that I want you to see. Okay, so let's take a minute break.
Mm.
Okay, you probably can hear me now. And anybody that gives me a yes, give me a yes. Come on. All right, thank you very much. Okay, there you go. There's the C's and the S's. Good, I appreciate that. I think that it's really cool to just take Santiago, Jimmy Santiago Baca. He's from New Mexico. It really shows, what Mexican American is all about. And Mexican Americans now, in the 80s, in the 90s, contemporary Mexican Americans, it just gives you that perspective. But it also gives you that perspective of poor on the first 10 minutes of Santiago Baca's display in awesome poetry and literature and Chicano lit and Chicano literature. Analyzes the social aspects of poverty, of not having anything, but yet having you. Okay, I think it's a very good lesson overall in life to what some of these feelings are and where they stayed and where these men stayed and stood behind and actually watching this senseless materialism, which was all brought by this European caste of the ricos and the rich. And the second one is growing up and becoming to one's own realization that you're a good person, but all the struggle of survival. And not the caring, but the cultural aspects of the family takes a strong over, and you find your roots again, even though your roots were long gone for years, as you are a true Mexican American today, in which perhaps you're third or fourth or fifth generation, that the realization of life and having given life, and and from within developing this incredible protectiveness that is so deep into the Mexican culture and the Mexican roots in the family and the familia, okay, is what makes the second poem and the second take of Jimmy Santiago back in Earthquakes. And I think that that's very important because I think it just gives you that other perspective, okay, that it is a resilience race, and it is one race that will prevail and has prevailed, and it has prevailed with all that with all to what this country has given to Mexicans, whatever they could take when they were at odds with the United States and when they are as true Americans today, always. So the struggles of Mexicans, in a nutshell for tonight, had to be, of course, from within. And from without. I leave you tonight with these thoughts, which means the struggles of all peoples in this world sometimes, but for Mexicans uniquely, this has been it. Okay? All movements at the end of the day will be coming from without, with a lot of resistance and protest and perhaps violence and perhaps not acceptance from society and from the mainstream. But at the end, all struggles also come from within, which means that as Mexican Americans became more and more and more and more of part of the system, then they also too, they became more and more and more knowledgeable about how to struggle within the system to make Mexican American survival and ultimately Mexican American contributions to the United society as true Americans as they today are on their third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation, and still thinking about the ancient days of grandmother who still can pull their hair and who still can give them some nice teas when they catch colds. Okay, guys. I hope that you truly enjoyed this. Make sure that you are continuing reading chapters 3 and 4. Okay, that's for sure. And make sure that you write your economy report. Okay, and I will send you again a sample. Okay, a sample and some directions. Okay, and just a second, Alex, and please check my email tomorrow or the next day. Please check emails, okay, so that you know, you get the stuff. And in the blue book, we're looking at California Lost. That's one. And the other chapter that you're looking in the blue book, in case you have it, it's going to be Mexican American communities. There you go, Alex. That's the one. You know, so take a look at those, and you know, if you have the blue book, those are the two chapters. And then I'm going to be sending you probably a quiz on California Lost. So be expecting that. Okay. But I think that we're going to be spending quite a lot of time, you know, looking at Chicano history in California, Chicano and the Movimiento in California. Next week, for sure, we're going to be looking at political parties within Chicanos, and I think that that should be, you know, that should be, you know, that should be some sort of an enlightening. I'm not sure yet, Saheda, but it should be, you know, maybe next week. Sometime, and it's going to be about California Lost. Okay, so I'll be giving you more information on that. So no pop quizzes and no quizzes that you have to do it the next day or the day after. I will be telling you that. Probably I'm going to give you some sort of a quiz next Monday, and you have to submit it like on Tuesday. Okay. Make sure you read. Okay. The homework. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight, and you know, please check my emails. I'm going to be sending you some information. Thank you very much again for being a great class tonight, and you know, I hope you really enjoyed it, and take a look at those links if you need to look at them again, and just wait for my next email. Make sure that you're going to submit those reports. I really appreciate it. And again, you should be getting your results on Guadalupe Hidalgo report very shortly. Okay. Buenas noches a todos. And it's Corona time. Yes. And for some of you, it's going to be leche time. Okay. Adiós a todos.
Porque, a ver, está bien escuchar, yo me quedo como, cuando vamos a participar, responde a la
porque es muy importante estar en todos esos programas.
Ajá.
Y inclusive, si te fijas médicas, es difícil entrar.
Claro. Oye, no es un trabajo.